So I've used Fujifilm cameras for the past 5 years. I've done kind of a little bit of everything with them, mostly like products, landscapes, portraits. Video stuff, I've done a little bit of talking to camera, like corporate interviews, obviously weddings. Yeah, I think they're really good cameras, and it's the system that I've invested a lot of money and time into. So I feel like I have well-rounded opinions about it that will hopefully not incite a war in the comments. I hope that I can give you some level of insight into the system if you're thinking about pursuing it for a specific purpose, like let's say you wanted to enter into photography for the first time, or maybe you wanted to pursue something on a more professional level with your Fujifilm cameras. I will offer you some advice on that. You can take it or leave it. Yeah, let's just move to the next thing. So Fujifilm was founded 90 years ago, and I think the thing that they're going to have the advantage over the competition is the color science. That's not to suggest that other camera manufacturers have poor color science. It's just a fact that Fujifilm, they made film for so long, so they know a thing or two about colors and how to achieve a certain look. And I think that for most people who use Fujifilm, that is the reason that they want a Fujifilm camera, and then they continue to use one. Now, the film simulations are something that I'm not personally that big on. I know, look, I know, it's just a personal choice. I would prefer to edit my photos myself instead of just relying on recipes for JPEGs. I can understand editing photos is actually like a hassle and pretty stressful for most people. I can't deny the colors that these film simulations they make are very pleasant. I don't think they look necessarily like the films that they're supposed to be simulating. I feel like it's like an imitation rather than a simulation. That's probably a better way of putting it, but it doesn't really look as sexy when you're trying to sell it, I guess. Anyway, when I go to edit my photos or video, I find that it's very easy to get the look that I want. I find that skin tones can be a little bit hit and miss. Those are the things I usually correct the most when it comes to people's faces or just like skin tones in general. But obviously the color green, like that, I think people would know Fujifilm for their green pop, and that is a look that translates both on photo and video, and I'd say it's a look that I really like. I've owned 3 Fujifilm cameras. Started off with the X Pro 2. Gosh, I look at the prices now on eBay, and whew, if I held on to it, I would have made a lot more money. But that's another story. I have currently in my possession the X-T4 and an X-H2S. The X-H2S is my main video camera, which I'm recording with right now, and my X-T4 is my main stills and backup video camera. The X-H2S is without a doubt the nicest, most capable camera I've ever owned. It's obviously a flagship camera for a reason. It has the best specs. It has the best ease of use when it comes to the layout with that little ink dotty thingy screen on the top. It doesn't have the fancy dials like the X-T4, which, you know, some people are going to bag out is not a very Fujifilm thing to do. But at the end of the day, using a dial like the one on the X-T4 is just not as convenient if you're in like a professional environment compared to using the spinny wheel thingy and just looking on the digital display. I've owned the X-T4 now for 4 years, and I have no desire to upgrade to the X-T5 anytime soon. I still feel that the X-T4 does everything that I needed to do, and look, 40 megapixel files on the X-T5, as great as that sounds, it does also mean I'm using up more hard drive space, and really, like, hard drives, they just eat up a lot of my budget. Honestly, like, the X-T4 is still a very capable camera. It's definitely the camera that I would pick up and use the most if I'm out doing some street photography, for example, or if I was to go on a trip somewhere, I'd probably take the X-T4 over the X-H2S simply because, like I was saying before, the X-H2S is a professionally minded camera first. It's the kind of camera that is going to appeal to the person who wants to get the job done, but they would also have another Fujifilm camera, ideally, that they would take away with them on weekends. And for me, that is the X-T4. And it is a tool that I've just used for so long now that it feels like second nature. Let's talk about the first Fujifilm camera that I owned, the X Pro 2. For me, it wasn't really ticking all the boxes. I started getting more work in video, and of course the X Pro 2 is a camera that is catered to photographers first. And yeah, it just ended up being a camera that I left behind for most shoots. I was also living in a rural part of Australia at that time, and look, maybe you could make a case that I would have used the camera more now that I'm living in Melbourne, but that was 3 years ago now that I last used the X Pro 2, and I don't have any regrets. I also find that the X Pro 2 is a camera that is harder to recommend these days because of the high prices that it goes for. It's a camera that has fallen victim to the Fujifilm price scalping, up there with the X100 and some other niche Fujifilm cameras. If there is a hole in your life that can only be filled by the X Pro 2, sure, go for it. But on the subject of lenses, Fujifilm has a pretty extensive library of lenses at this point. They could do with an update in some of them, but I think overall their lenses and what they can offer are pretty good. I haven't owned a lot of their lenses, but here's a quick overview of what I think of the ones that I have owned. The 23mm f1.4 is a fantastic lens, super versatile, and when you open up the aperture, it has a lot of character. The 16 to 55mm f2.8, that's a boring lens, but it gets the job done, does everything I need to do really well, and it's built like a tank, so I have no complaints. The 50mm f1, now that is a lens that I used a lot over the past 2 years. I ended up selling it because the minimum focusing distance was starting to become an issue for some of the work that I was doing. Man, that lens is incredible. I don't know how they managed to make a lens that could focus so quickly at f1 and not suck. It's such a great lens. If you do portraiture, mate, it's a given that you should own that lens. The 16mm f1.4 is a lens I don't really use anymore, but from what I have used of it, it is really useful. It's a bit old now, I will say, but again, it's not really something that I'm using that often, so hey. I also owned the 23mm f2 lens. That's the smaller one. It's fine. I mean, if you're just getting started with prime lenses, that's probably the one I'd go with. Here's a question for you. Can you use Fujifilm cameras professionally? I would say you can. But if you were thinking about pulling the pin, here are some things that you should consider. As we are painfully aware at this point, Fujifilm's autofocus is just not quite there yet. If you are someone who is very reliant on using autofocus, you're going to be very frustrated using Fujifilm cameras for video and photo work. If you do a lot of video and you know how to manually focus, that's fine, you won't have any issues. It's not like you can't do a professional video shoot with the AF inside a Fujifilm camera. It's just a fact that their autofocus is not as good as the competition. But hey, that could be an incentive for you to learn how to manually focus. I don't know. As for photographers, yeah, look, I think it's pretty notorious at this point that Fujifilm has a tendency to release cameras that have autofocus and tell you that you've locked focus, and you look later on and it's just like, oh, okay, it's not actually in focus. Thanks, great, no worries. That is pretty frustrating, and especially if you work in a very fast-paced environment where you need reliable AF, I can understand why you wouldn't want to go with Fujifilm. Having said that, I don't think the AF is as bad as everybody says. I feel like we get this sense as Fujifilm uses that photography is impossible because the AF is so bad. I'm like, it's not bad. Like, it's not using a Canon 5D Classic in modern day bad. It's still going to pick focus, and it's still manageable for most circumstances. You can do any kind of work with any kind of camera as long as you can prove that you have done the work. Most people could not care what kind of camera you use, as long as you deliver the product. That's what people care about at the end of the day. Every single camera has drawbacks. Those same cameras all have workarounds. You just figure them out and you go and make shit. On a broader scale, about things that are not so nice about Fujifilm, well, there's been multiple reports recently about build quality issues. I've seen people make videos about how they've sent their cameras back because something's broken or there's paint chipping off the top of their cameras, which is pretty bad for a brand new camera, and especially if your flagship camera has a CF card failure like mine did and I had to set it back. We really should be expecting a camera that's going to do the job for us and not fail us at a critical moment. Even with the X-T4, I have a friend in Sydney who owns an X-T4 and he has had to send it back to Fujifilm twice now because of problems with the shutter just like sticking. To be fair though, they did fix the camera for free, and they also fixed my camera for free, which is very good. I want to be somewhat optimistic about the future of the build quality of Fujifilm, but yeah, if any recent examples are anything to go off of, it seems like they're having some kind of issues, which is not great. I really hope they make a strong emphasis on fixing those issues with their lineup going into 2025. Okay, here are 5 things that I would like Fujifilm to work on in the future. Every so often, I just get told to turn my camera off, and those glitches never seem to go away with firmware updates, so don't know what's up with that, but I wish it would stop happening. Secondly, this switch on the X-T4, I'm always bumping it into HDR mode, and it is embarrassing how many HDR photos I have on my hard drive because I've accidentally bumped the switch. I'm sick of taking HDR photos. Thirdly, the electronic shutter noise. Who thought that was a nice noise? Like, just truly one of the most awful sounding noises in the world. The price scalpers on Gumtree and eBay. I understand this isn't a Fujifilm problem, sort of, but it's just very annoying that these cameras are in such demand that they're being upsold for potentially $500 more than their retail value. So it's just ridiculous. Like, let's all go and take a deep breath, okay? The X100VI should not be $3,500 Australian. That is outrageous. Fujifilm just keeps abandoning camera lines, and it's really, you know, it's just a very corporate move. Like, come on guys, just release some weird, crazy cameras and keep them on sale. I dare you. Hey, we're outside now. And I'm using the influencer microphone. Anyway, yes, Fujifilm does have a lot of problems, but I also feel like the same could be said about any camera manufacturer. And at the end of the day, most cameras these days, it's hard to find a bad camera. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I haven't moved on from Fujifilm, because there hasn't been an incentive for me to move on to a different system because it's quote-unquote better than Fujifilm. There's times where I've wanted to move on to something else because there's a shiny new toy that is pulling me over in one direction. At the end of the day, the Fujifilm system does what I need it to do, and it does it really well. So if you were considering getting a Fujifilm camera for any kind of purpose, I hope this video helped. I hope you got something out of it. I know that Fujifilm has a lot of flaws, but I feel like they're still making really great cameras, and I'm excited to see what they do this year with their upcoming releases. For those of you who are still watching, thank you very much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. The recent support that I've had has been staggering. I can't believe that there are, 430-ish of you at the moment who are subscribed to me. Thanks for that. Please, if you are someone who hasn't subscribed yet, just go down or go up or wherever it is that you need to go, and just hit that little subscribe button, and you'll see more of this head telling you about cameras and other bullshit. I think that's all I have in me. Bye.